I just know you're ready to hear about a little crime. Welcome to Crime Daddies.
Warning, this podcast is hosted by two true crime dads that will talk about murder, drugs, rape, and offenses against children. We may crack jokes and make light of something so terrible that has happened, but it will never be about the victim or the victim's family. You have been warned. Welcome back to another week of Crime Daddies, everybody. I am Hunter.
And I am Jacob.
We are so thankful and grateful to have everybody back every week with us. Every week, you guys just go above and beyond for us. We're starting to see more and more numbers. We're starting to grow more and more each week. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you, every single one of you listening right now.
And the community that you guys have given us has been nothing short of a blessing. Just to be able to talk to you guys. Like right now, if you guys know, and you've been fans for a while, you know we go live every time we record. And we've spent the past, 20 minutes or so just talking to you guys, and it's been really cool. So that's been one of the coolest parts about it, is knowing that we have that connection with you guys and being able to hear your stories, and then hopefully we can tell some of them at some point in time.
And if you ever see one of us out in public, do not be bashful to come up and talk to us, because I've had it happen to me now a handful of times. And it's a very surreal feeling, but I am grateful to have fans out there that actually feel comfortable coming up and talking to me about the podcast.
Man, it is so cool. Like, I had just moved and I went into the city hall to set up my water at my new address. And the lady at the front desk was like, "Don't you have a podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, I actually do." It was that small interaction right there that made it really cool, that I'm just going to go get water and gas at my new address set up. And now this person is recognizing me.
Yeah, and I'm actually coaching my son's t-ball team right now, and I've actually had parents on my son's t-ball team ask if I'm the one doing Crime Daddy's podcast, and I'm like, I am. And they're like, "Man, we listen to you every week." And I'm like, that's awesome to hear, because I guess it's just a proud moment of, realizing that there's people actually out there listening to us.
Yeah.
And like I said in other episodes, me and Jacob wanted to do this because we seen that there was not anybody covering cases out of SEMO. And I figured, I listen to true crime podcasts all day when I'm at work, so why not just do a podcast of my own? Because I wanted to hear about crimes out of Southeast Missouri.
Yep, exactly. And here we are doing it. So thank you guys. But other than that, today, Hunter, I'm going to get us started on a case from our hometown, Dexter, Missouri.
All right, I'm going to be excited to hear what you're bringing to the table this week, Jacob.
All right, Hunter. So whenever people hear the term mass shooting, you usually picture something that's very different than what we're going to talk about today. You picture school shootings, you picture crowded mall shootings, maybe concert venues, movie theaters. In a lot of major cities is where you think of mass shootings happening. You picture something that dominates national headlines for weeks, don't you, whenever I say the word mass shooting?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime I hear a mass shooting, the two things that come, or I guess three things that instantly come to my mind, is the mass shooting that happened in Vegas at that country concert, and then the Columbine school shooting, and then also the theater shooting that happened in Colorado when the Batman movie premiered.
Yeah, that's what kind of gets your attention. But the thing is that mass shootings, by definition, aren't as big as you might think. Mass shootings happen every day almost in the United States of America, which just happens to be a huge talking point in modern day politics, which we're going to try and avoid today. But the definition of a mass shooting is generally considered an incident where 4 or more people are shot in one single event, not including the shooter. So it's not 4 people shot over the course of 4 days. That's not a mass shooting. It's 4 people shot during one event, one crime event. And some people don't even realize that one of the deadliest mass shootings in SEMO, Missouri history happened more than 40 years ago in a small town bar right in Dexter, Missouri. And so that's what makes this story so fascinating. So let's go ahead and hop into it.
All right, before you get into it, I'm going to talk about it. So in my early 20s, I spent some of my time in bars, primarily the I think it was called the Library in Bloomfield, right off Highway 25. Is that what it was called, the Library?
I don't know. I know there's a place called the Library in Cape.
I'm pretty sure it's called the Library in Bloomfield, Missouri, off Highway 25. But I also spent my fair share drinking some beers and shooting some pool with some buddies.
Yep. It's just what you did. It's what everyone does, especially in rural areas. there's not a lot to do. And so you just find yourself drinking your days away in your youth until you have a family. But as you know, Dexter isn't St. Louis. It's not Kansas City. It's not Chicago. Dexter's a town where everybody knows everybody. It's a town where your grandparents probably knew my grandparents. It's a town where if someone gets arrested on Friday night, then everyone knows by Saturday morning kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're going to see what's happening all over SEMO Times.
Yeah.
Or Speak Your Mind, Dexter, Missouri.
That's a big one around here. I'm trying to tell you that rumors travel through Dexter faster than the traffic moves down Highway 25. Like, it is instant. And on July 17th, 1982, a group of friends gathered inside the Red Fox Lounge in Dexter. These weren't strangers. They weren't gang members. They weren't people passing through town. They were drinking buddies, like you said, buddies that you went and just hung out with. Maybe you gambled. Maybe you just played some pool. Honestly, it just sounds like a bunch of guys that I know today. A bunch of men sitting around a table, talking trash, drinking beer, probably arguing about something stupid because that's what we all do after a few drinks, and just spending a regular Saturday afternoon together. And the problem was that this group wasn't just arguing about something stupid anymore. According to investigators, tensions had been building for weeks whenever this event happened. There were accusations being thrown around. There was a lot of distrust in the group, a lot of paranoia. And at the center of it all was a belief that somebody in the group had become an informant and was talking to the local law enforcement.
So they were conspiring to take out a snitch is what it sounds like.
Yeah, they kind of were starting to get their feelers up, and they thought someone maybe was a rat, and they had to act accordingly. At least that's what they thought they had to do.
So what were they doing to make them feel like somebody's going to snitch on them? Were they like a part of some sort of trafficking, or were they a part of some sort of gang?
We're going to get into it. And we're going to talk about the influences of the area at that time and how it kind of differs from today. But at approximately 4:15 that afternoon, whatever had been simmering beneath the surface finally boiled over. When the gunfire stopped, there were 4 people dead. The floor of the Red Fox Lounge was littered with spent shell casings. 2 men fled the scene, and a small Missouri town was left trying to understand how a group of longtime friends could end up slaughtering one another in broad daylight. This is the story of the Red Fox Lounge shootout.
Where was the Red Fox Lounge located?
I'm about to tell you in just a moment. That's why I'm going to give you a quick rundown of Dexter itself, because if you're not from SEMO, it might be hard to understand the kind of place that Dexter is, especially in 1982. And honestly, it's hard to understand the kind of place Dexter even is today.
This is what I know about Dexter from all the years I've lived in Dexter. I've lived in Dexter since I was born, pretty much. I personally grew up underprivileged in Dexter. I was kind of poor growing up all through school. And after I got out of school, I worked really hard and I made the right decisions and I excelled in different opportunities that were gave to me. And I've been able to build a good life for my family and I. But there is a stigma around Dexter where it's either you're poor or you're rich. And there seems to be sort of like a tension between the two classes in Dexter.
Mm-hmm.
I did see that when I was in school, but I was pretty fortunate when I was in school. I had a lot of confidence in myself, so I really wasn't treated any different than any other kid.
Sure.
Because of that. From the outside looking in at Dexter, you can definitely see that there is definitely a divide in the social classes in Dexter.
There definitely is. And so Dexter sits in Stoddard County in Missouri, in the Boot Heel, right north of the Boot Heel, actually. And it was founded in 1873. Initially, it was founded as a railroad town. Now, if you're from Dexter, you know those damn railroads get you stopped whenever you need to be somewhere important at the most inconvenient times. In a lot of ways, the railroad is the reason that Dexter exists. The town grew around the tracks. The grain elevators and the businesses that followed was started as a railroad stop, eventually became one of the biggest hubs in SEMO. Today, people passing through see a town of about 8,000 people. But if you've ever lived here, you know Dexter is a lot bigger than the population suggests. This is where people from Bernie, Bloomfield, Puxico, Essex, Dudley, and half of the area end up at some point during the week. Everybody goes to Dexter. You come here for groceries. You come here for football games. You come here for school events. You come here because eventually everybody ends up in Dexter at some point in their week, right?
Yeah, that's very true because Dexter has the Walmart. Dexter has the Busy Bee Lumber. Dexter has all the fast food restaurants. Dexter has everything in Stoddard County that everybody wants that they don't want to drive to either Poplar Bluff or Cape Girardeau to get. So I've always wondered why Bloomfield holds the capital of Stoddard County compared to it being Dexter.
I think just because it might be a little bit older. I think Bloomfield was around in like pre-Civil War days, and so that town was already established. Like it said, Dexter wasn't established until 1873, which was just a few years after the Civil War. And so I think that's probably where it is. Bloomfield just has a deeper historical tie, even though Dexter definitely is the hub of Stoddard County. Now, I say all this because obviously I'm from here. I grew up here. I graduated high school here. My family grew up here. Hell, most of my family got arrested here at some point by somebody, by some police officer. This is my home, so I know what I'm talking about. So when I joke that Dexter is like the meth capital of Stoddard County, I'm allowed to do it because it's an inside joke, because we all know that crime and drugs and all these things that lie beneath the bed of what you see in Dexter just kind of run a lot of the crime that happens in the area.
Yeah, me and Jacob can heavily relate to crime in Sutter County because I've had personally, I think 3 of my family members get arrested in Sutter County. And like I said in a previous episode, my brother got stabbed in Sutter County and almost died. So, Sutter County does hold a place in our hearts, but we also relate to different victims of these crimes that we cover because me and Jacob have lived this life.
And Dad, if you're listening, I love you, but he tried to be the Walter White of Dexter, Missouri. And so every time I ever got pulled over in high school and my car was in my dad's name, they would say his name over their walkie-talkie a few times and then say, "Hey, can we search your car?" And so it happens. It's a small town. And if you've ever spent any amount of time in Dexter, you really know that privacy doesn't really exist. You can't go to Walmart without seeing somebody you know. You can't sit down and eat somewhere without running into someone you've graduated with. You can't get gas without hearing about someone's cousin, somebody's divorce, somebody's arrest, or someone's bad decision. News travels super fast in Dexter. And if that's the case, then you know that rumors also travel just as fast. And back in the early 80s, this was especially true. And now that we're in 2026, I'm going to let you guys know that nothing much has changed. It's all the same. Maybe even faster now with social media.
Shout out Speak Your Mind Dexter, Missouri on the Facebook page.
Yeah, because I like to know everybody's business, and I'm just as nosy. Maybe it's just the Dexter in me, but it's nice to know things, But back then, the town was smaller. It was a lot more rural. And in some ways, it felt more connected than it is now. People spend their evenings in bars, taverns, local gathering places. Honestly, not much has changed. People still do that today. Anybody from Dexter knows exactly what I'm talking about. You go right across the railroad tracks where Sonny sits. You head down to the pool hall if you want to play some pool. You run into the same people you've been running into for years. Heck, I spent a good chunk of my childhood hanging around the pool hall because my dad's friend's mom owned it. And so I would go there and I'd play pool all day. I'd play arcade games. I'd hang out. I'd get 25-cent sodas and I would just be balling. And one thing you learn quickly in a small town is that everybody knows everybody's business. I'm repeating it over and over because it's very important in this case. Everybody knows who drinks together. You know who gambles together. You know who's feuding with who. And so that's what makes the Red Fox shooting so important to understand, that it wasn't like a robbery gone wrong. It wasn't like some stranger that just came into town and wanted to blow off some steam. According to investigators, this was a feud among people who had known each other for years, people who spent weekends together, people who had shared drinks together, people who trusted each other enough to sit at the same table, probably knew each other's families. And maybe that's one of the most unsettling parts of this entire story, is that the people sitting at this table didn't think they were sitting with their killers until they were. And to really give you guys some more understanding about how something like this could happen, you have to understand that Dexter wasn't living in a bubble completely. In fact, neither was Southeast Missouri. When most people think about organized crime, they think about the big cities, right? You think about New York, Chicago, Vegas, maybe St. Louis. You don't think about places like Dexter, Bloomfield, Sykeston, Bernie, or Cape Girardeau. But geography has always mattered in the criminal world, for sure.
I was just listening to an episode covered by True Crime Couple, and they were talking about how you had the mob and the mafia up in the East Coast. I never knew this, but there's actually it's called Dixie Mafia.
Yeah.
It was all over the South, but it was primarily in Alabama and I think Mississippi. And they just covered a really interesting case about that. So it just goes to show you that even if you're from the South or from a small town, there can be organized crime everywhere.
That is why Southeast Missouri is at a very interesting spot on the map, because we are just east of the Ozarks, and we are also positioned between two major cities, those being St. Louis and Memphis. We've talked about it before in the podcast. We're like 2.5 hours from each of those. We just get on interstate and it's a straight shot to either St. Louis or Memphis. And for generations, highways, railroads, and river traffic connected this region to the rest of the country. So you think being on the Mississippi River, which is one of the biggest rivers in the world, there's a lot of people going through this area. What looked like a collection of sleepy farming communities was actually sitting in the middle of several major transportation corridors. People can push a lot of product and a lot of crime, a lot of drugs through these areas because they're very rural. Not a lot of cops, not a lot of eyes on anybody. Now, before anyone gets up in arms and acts like I'm calling Dexter like a mob-run town, that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that the overwhelming majority of people here are hardworking people, even to this day. The majority of the jobs in our area are farmers, factory workers, truck drivers, railroad employees, even small business owners, and then people that work in education. Like that makes up 90% of the jobs we have. Good people trying to build a life and raise a family, but every region has an undercurrent. Through the 1960s, 70s, and into the 80s a little bit, organized crime figures would allow outlaw motorcycle clubs, illegal gambling operations, and then some later drug traffickers all around rural communities in the area. Small towns offered anonymity in a different way than large cities. It's easy to hide in places where no one's looking at you. People knew each other, but outsiders could move through quickly. Business could be conducted quietly. Information traveled by word of mouth. And if you knew the right people, there was always a card game, a bookie, or someone willing to make an introduction. That doesn't mean Dexter was controlled by criminals. It means that criminals were in Dexter. It means that many communities across rural America occasionally found themselves intersecting with larger criminal networks and cultures that extended beyond county lines. And so by 1982, investigators believed tensions had been building up among this group for weeks. There were rumors, there was some accusations, and eventually there was a belief that somebody inside the group was talking to law enforcement. Whether that suspicion was true or not almost doesn't matter at the end of the day, because once trust disappears from a tight-knit group, especially one built on secrets, money, gambling, and alcohol, things can unravel quickly. I'm sure you can attest to that the moment you start to distrust somebody in this area, it's like, all right, now they're out of my life. I don't care about them anymore.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that because I got a story like back before my dad got arrested in drug trafficking. I remember one time, I guess there was some tension going on with what he was involved with. And I remember him having to tell me, like, if somebody follows you, drive to the police station. If, somebody's staring at you or something's going on, just go to the police station because he was afraid that maybe something that had been going on with him may transpire towards me. So when you're around that environment, you just got to watch your back 24/7.
Exactly. And on this hot July afternoon in 1982, that's exactly what happened. So let's go back to the 17th of that month. By that time, that Saturday afternoon had arrived. Investigators would later say that tensions among the group involved had already been building up for at least a month. According to Dexter Police Chief Steve Fish, law enforcement had received information that there had been, quote, something brewing among the group. Nobody seemed to know exactly what the dispute was about, but authorities believed the conflict had been escalating behind the scenes for weeks. And on that afternoon of July 17th, several members of the group gathered inside the Red Fox Lounge, located along one of Dexter's main streets, right across the tracks in what could be described as Skid Row, where a lot of the bars and taverns are, even to this day. The Red Fox wasn't a hidden backwoods establishment. It was a local bar where people, regardless of class, would gather, drink, socialize, and spend time together. And approximately 4:15 p.m., something happened at that table. Unfortunately, newspaper reports from the time don't tell us exactly what words were exchanged or what specific events triggered the violence. I did my best to kind of try and find stuff. Like we've said before, it's really hard to get some of these key details whenever we're dealing with old cases in rural communities. However, what investigators would later allege is that one man believed a member of the group had been providing information to the law enforcement regarding unspecified activities, pretty much called him a rat. According to authorities, 31-year-old Jimmy L. Caudle of Granite City, Illinois, opened fire inside the tavern. Police later stated that they believed Lonnie J. Waters, 32, was the intended target. Chief Fish told reporters investigators believed the suspects thought Waters was a, quote, snitch, end quote. But according to police, the shooting didn't just stop with Waters. Investigators alleged that multiple people at the table were shot because the gunman wanted to make sure they had eliminated the person they believed was informing on them. When the shooting ended, there was 4 people that were dead. The first one was Charles Mansfield, 39, who was the bartender at the Red Fox Lounge, a lady by the name of Mary E. Borden, 37, Jimmy D. Kreider, 48, and Lonnie J. Waters, 32.
So essentially, they took 2 innocent bystanders out.
Yeah, they just wanted to go and spray because they didn't know who was the informant, and they took out people that weren't even involved. And all 4 of these victims were from Dexter. They lived there. So think about how quickly that happened. 1 minute you're just sitting in this bar on a Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock. It's not even late at night. You're just sitting there drinking, talking, and probably telling stories and, shooting the shit, just messing around. And then out of nowhere, gunfire erupts. And before anyone fully understands what happens, there's 4 dead bodies. Authorities quickly identified 2 suspects, Jimmy L. Caudle and Dallas Cluck Jr., both 31 years old. According to investigators, the men fled Dexter after the shooting. Their freedom wouldn't last long, though, because law enforcement officers tracked them down later the same evening, roughly about 50 miles away in the Cape Girardeau area. Both men were arrested and charged with 4 counts of capital murder. As news spread throughout Dexter, shock obviously happened pretty quick, and then it turned into disbelief, not because nobody knew who had done it, but because everybody knew each other. They just didn't expect this to happen. The victims knew the suspects knew the victims. The people involved had spent years around the same tables, in the same places, in the same social circles. With both suspects now in custody, investigators believed that they had answered the question of who was responsible. What they couldn't answer was how a group of friends ended there in the first place. And that's what sticks with me about this case, is because out of nowhere, there's 4 dead people inside a Dexter tavern, a month-long feud that was really just based off speculation at most, rumors, suspicion, nothing concrete. They couldn't prove anything. It was just hurt feelings that turned into violence, just people that were mad and decided to kill somebody over it. And so for me, that's what makes the Red Fox Lounge shootout a little different from many cases that we cover. Because it wasn't like a serial killer. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't like a mystery suspect.
It was just 4 senseless deaths that happened. And it's very unfortunate that 4 lives were taken over probably something that wasn't even going on that they suspected. And I'm sure for back then it was a huge shock to Dexter, because stuff like that doesn't really happen in Dexter. It's typically not related to anything gang related, kind of like what you're describing.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say this right now. I was at my friend's birthday party yesterday, and there's 6 or 7 of us all there drinking and, shooting the shit, talking about sports betting, doing the same thing these guys were doing, drinking, gambling. And I couldn't imagine if that event that was just seemed pretty normal ended with 4 of us dead. And so I'm sure, thinking from that perspective, it just blows my mind. But that's what makes it hard, is because it's about people who share drinks, stories, and weekends and years of their lives together. Most of us worry about danger coming from strangers, but some of the worst violence in history happens between people you know, and that's just the sucky part. Eventually, Dexter moved on as a town. The bars stayed open, kids kept playing football, families kept raising children, life went forward, as it always does. But the families of Charles Mansfield, Mary Borden, Jimmy Kreider, and Lonnie Waters became unforgettable. And the day of July 17th, 1982 became a day they could never forget. And that's the story of the Red Fox Lounge shootout, a forgotten piece of SEMO history, and a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't a stranger at all. It's someone sitting at your table.
Pretty scary to think about that something could erupt like that amongst people that you could probably trust and call your brothers.
Yeah, that's the scary part. And it's just a dispute, and just because they assumed, they speculated that you might be a rat, and they had no concrete proof. I mean, according to what I was able to find, there wasn't a lot. But to what I saw, the police said they couldn't find anything that would even suggest that these people were informants to them. So it's what was the point in this whole process?
Were these guys involved in drug trafficking or something?
See, that's where it kind of gets a little speculative, but I'm going to go ahead and watch my words very carefully here. But for someone to result to murdering 4 people, I think it would be a safe prediction to say that there may have been some things a little bit worse than just normal small petty crime, if that makes sense.
So some form of illegal activity going on behind the scenes, because I've said it in the past, I couldn't take somebody's life unless they mess with my kids or wife.
Yep.
It just doesn't make sense to take 4 people's lives over something that's probably so simple to, resolve.
Yeah, that's why I wanted just to throw in that part about how there were some organized crime connections to the area, either through mafia trying to find places that are less known, less occupied, or even just motorcycle clubs going up and down the interstate from St. Louis to Memphis. Like, it's a hotbed for crime. And so I'm not going to sit here and say exactly what happened because I don't know, but I wanted to put that out there because that is just the reality of the time. That's what happened in the area. So it wouldn't be too outlandish to say there might have been some connection to something that was bigger than just small crime. I don't see someone murdering 4 people for something small. Now, it happens, but it's not frequent that big crimes like this happen over petty things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back on history, I would say the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and even the 90s were like the heyday for motorcycle gangs. So I can understand that it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could have all been intertwined with some sort of gang activity.
Yeah, so that's just the information I could find, and so I wanted to provide it to you guys. It felt like mostly a history lesson of Dexter, but I feel like it kind of just describes why it became such a big thing, but then why it also got brushed over, because Dexter has a reputation of just shoving skeletons into the closet and shutting the door and moving on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Jacob, for bringing us this case this week. It's very interesting. I've actually heard of this case before, but I didn't know all the in-depth details that you provided during this episode. So thank you for bringing that to us this week.
And thank you to my dad, because somehow, some way, I don't know how he does it, but every case we cover from SEMO, he knows something about it. I mean, he's only 50 years old, so he's not even that old, but he either knows somebody who was involved, or he knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. Like, he suggested this one to me because one of his buddies was related to one of the people that were murdered, and I think it was like his uncle or something. And forgive me if I'm getting that wrong if you're listening, but shout out my dad for this case suggestion. I never heard of it until he brought it up, and then I talked to his buddy about it, and his buddy said, yeah, one of those guys was my uncle or something, I forget, but really interested. It just shows you how these things are still connected to people that are around today. 1982 is not that long ago. That's what, 44 years ago?
Yeah, 44 years ago.
Yeah, so that's not too far away. But that's all I got for you on today's episode. I hope you guys liked it. I hope you guys liked the history lesson on Dexter. This is the first one we've ever talked about that's exclusively from our hometown. There's a few others in the close to the area. There's not many things that happen in terms of like major crime. A lot of the stuff that happens around here, to be honest, is just a lot of meth, a lot of meth, and then some crimes that aren't really violent. Violent crime doesn't really happen here. Maybe every once in a while someone gets in a fist fight or someone does something stupid, but for the most part, a lot of the crime in Dexter is pretty mild.
Yeah, and it is extremely hard to find enough information about different cases around SEMO to actually build an in-depth case for everybody. Because me and Jacob's goal is to always put out a case every week that's like at least 30 minutes long. But unless it's been a huge publicized case in the media within the last 20 years or so, it seems like it's hard to really dig and find enough information about the case as far as the investigation that went into it, the crime itself, the courts and the proceedings and the trials and, everything else that goes involved with the crime itself. It's just really hard to build a case out of most of the stuff that happens in SEMO.
Yeah, and so like I said, if you guys ever want to suggest anything to us, it'd be awesome if you just give us a few resources. But I was trying to find as much information as I could about this case, and I did with what I could. There's only like a few articles, and there was like old newspaper clippings from the event. And like I said, it kind of got swept under the rug and moved on because that's what Dexter does with a lot of problems. And so I'm glad to bring it back up again because I know those families are still around and that pain is still real. And these people were still related to other people. And it's important to tell people's stories, That's what we do it for at the end of the day, is we like to share stuff and keep the memories of these people alive above all else.
Yeah, so everybody, let's remember all the victims that was involved in this case. Hope that they're resting in peace. Our condolences go out to their families. There was 4 lives taken way too soon over something probably so senseless, in my opinion. But just like every week, everybody, go to all of our podcast streaming platforms, leave us reviews. Hopefully it's a 5-star review. And like us, share us out on your socials. You can find me on TikTok at Hunter_SEMO. You can find me on Instagram at Hunter.SEMO. And if you want to look me up on Facebook, I am Hunter Ben Frampton. And Jacob, what are your socials?
You can find me at TikTok and Instagram at Jacob W.C. Smith, and you can find me on Facebook at Jacob Smith. The one that is from Dexter is what I have on there. So there's a lot of Jacob Smith, so make sure you pick the one that has that, and then it has some Crime Daddy stuff in the bio, so that should help you. You can also follow our Crime Daddies pages on Facebook at Crime Daddies, and then Instagram at Crime Daddies Pod, where we post pictures related to the event and stuff. It's kind of hard sometimes, like this one. I don't think I'll be able to find a picture for. I'll post like the newspaper clippings, but for the most part, we try and put some pictures out there for you guys to go and look at. So if you have any suggestions for cases, we also have links in all of our bios to a Google form. You guys can go on there and suggest a case. Just give us 2 sources for us to use and give us a little brief summary of the crime that can get us started. And we cover 2 of those suggested cases per month. So it's called the Crime Daddies Tip Line. So go ahead and go access those on all of our social medias. There's a link in the bio.
All right, everybody. Until next week, we appreciate your time you spent with us at Crime Daddies. Goodbye.
Goodbye.